Hey folks, this is Mark Roberge, Chief Revenue Officer at HubSpot. I hope you're having a fantastic day at the Social Selling Summit, and thank you for jumping in here to my session. Should be an exciting 30 minutes here. We're going to talk about the sales acceleration formula, going from 0 to 100 million with data technology and inbound selling. Should be a blast. So, my context here at HubSpot, I came in here as roughly the fourth employee. I grew global sales for the first 7 years of the business, got my team up to about 450 people across sales, services, and support. Got the company to about 100 million in revenue run rate. And what's interesting about the story is coming into this position, I really had no sales experience. Right? I'm a mechanical engineer by training. I started my career writing code at Accenture. And I've got an MIT MBA, which tends to be more of a quant-oriented MBA. So I've had a professional career up into my days at HubSpot of really looking through the world through a lens of data and technology. And it was that lens through which I used to build up the HubSpot sales team, and I'm going to kind of talk to you guys a little bit about today. So when I first took the role, I wrote down this mission, which was predictable, scalable revenue growth. And there were 4 tactics that I really focused on in achieving that mission. The first was I wanted to hire the same successful salesperson every single time. I wanted to train them in the exact same way. I wanted to provide them with the same quality and quantity of leads every single month. And I wanted to hold that salesperson to working those leads using the same sales process. That was the machine that I set out to build. And I figured if I could achieve those 4 things, I'd have a really good likelihood of achieving predictable, scalable revenue growth. So this will dictate the next 30 minutes here. Right? So let's start on the hiring front. The thing that was really interesting to me on hiring was people would often ask me, what's the ideal sales hire for yourself? And I can answer that. I'm going to tell you guys what it was for HubSpot, but I don't think it's the most applicable question for you because what I learned was context is so relevant here. And I'm thinking back to the first year of hiring. I probably brought in like 10 or 12 people. There was a person I brought in that was number 1 out of an 800-person sales team. I was so psyched to convince them to come over to the company, and I literally thought they would come in and rewrite the whole playbook, teach me how to sell. And they came in. They didn't bomb, but they didn't do exceptionally well either. And I realized, I was like, why? How could this possibly happen? And when I thought about the company they came from, it was a big public brand. It was a very transactional sell. Everybody knew what was coming the minute they heard that company name. And it was really all about just jamming through as much activity and volume as possible. That couldn't be a more different sales context than HubSpot today and especially back then. I mean, we had a very evangelistic sell. We were trying to bring the meme of inbound marketing and the concept of inbound marketing out to the world. No one had a clue what it was. I mean, it was just like, hey, we're an inbound marketing company. What's inbound marketing? Oh, it's the process of creating content to attract people to your website and convert them to leads and customers. Wow, that sounds cool. How does that work? I mean, it was an ongoing conversation. So that was a big learning for me. Now, despite the fact that each hiring formula per se is different for every company, I do believe there's a standard process that you can use to engineer your ideal hire. Right? So basically what I did was I wrote down the 10 criteria that I thought would correlate with success, that I should be looking for in interviews and would correlate with success in our model. And I was very clear about what each one meant. I was very clear about what a score of a 1, a 5, a 7, a 10 would be, and I was disciplined about scoring every candidate and especially every hire against that model. And it was interesting, 6 months into that process, I brought in 6 or 7 people. Some of them were absolute rock stars. Some of them were doing just okay. It was very interesting to kind of go back and reflect and say, well, what's consistent here amongst the rock stars? And what is consistent about those who are okay? And how do I need to adapt this model? And what am I missing? Let's think beyond the 10 criteria. What are the patterns here that I'm missing that I need to add in? And it wasn't that long, a year or 2 in, where I had actually enough data points to run a regression analysis. Right now, that's scary, but I got one of my buddies from MIT who's a PhD stats guy to come over and run this regression analysis and actually let the stats speak to us as to what characteristics were actually predicting success within our model. And this was actually the first run of that regression analysis. This wasn't the end answer. This was the first run of it back in, I think, 2008, 2009. But what was cool about this first run is obviously like the things at the bottom with the blue bars moving to the left, those are the negatively correlated characteristics. These are the characteristics that if they had them, they didn't necessarily predict success. In fact, if they had them, they almost were less successful. And the ones up here with the long right bars to the right, these are the ones that are really correlating with success. What was cool about this was you look at these things like at the bottom, like closing ability, convincing, objection handling. These are things that we probably associate with a generic salesperson. And when you look at the top, things like preparation and domain experience and intelligence, these are things that we probably associate with like a really great trusted advisor or consultant. And to me, it was like, wow, the stats are really telling us that the buyer is expecting a different type of salesperson. The buyer has a lot more control today and is not going to put up with the arm-twisting antics that are very typical within sales. And they really want someone that they can kind of partner with, and it's going to bring a lot of value to that conversation. So that was pretty cool. So let me tell you the answer, and remember the big caveat that the answer is not going to necessarily be the same for you. So the 5 criteria that really correlated for us in order of priority were coachability, curiosity, intelligence, work ethic, and prior success. Right? And what was really funny about this was coachability wasn't even in my initial theory of the 10 criteria that I was actually evaluating over. So I do find that these 5 tend to be very influential in like a tech startup type context. So if you come from that context, perhaps this will be valuable to you. Right? So let's move on to training now. And it was interesting. When I first took the position, I interviewed and had coffee with probably like 30 VPs of sales to try to figure all this stuff out back in 2007, 2008. And I asked them, like, how do you train your salespeople? And the most common answer I got was just this ride along. You know, it's just like, hey, Bob, welcome to the company. It's your first day. You remember Sue, our #1 salesperson over here? Yeah, of course. Well, your training is going to be sit next to Sue for 2 months and watch what she does. And something just didn't sit well with me, you know, with that strategy. It didn't feel scalable. It didn't feel predictable. And, you know, quarters later, I realized why that gut instinct, I'm glad I followed it, because as I look across the sales team, they have those same attributes I talked about in the opening section, but they also have this like superpower that they lean into that makes them individually great. Right, like I've got this one guy, Adam, who is just like an absolute activity hound. Like you look over his shoulders and at any time, and he has like 20 tabs open on the CRM. He's on the phone. He's writing notes. He's sending emails. He has like 40% more activity than anyone else on the floor. And then you've got another person, Jen, who is just an amazing rapport builder. You talk to her customers, they know each other's passions, their pets, their favorite sports fans. It's just like they just love Jen. And Adam's not the best at the rest of the funnel, and Jen's not the best at the rest of the funnel. But because they're so good at that one unique superpower, they close a lot of business. Now imagine if on Jen's first day she was trained by sitting next to Adam, or Adam was trained by sitting next to Jen. Like these would be really different outcomes in terms of their impression of what success meant like at HubSpot. They probably would have never leaned into that unique superpower. So I wanted to change that. And so that my big conclusion was the ride-along strategy was just not scalable nor predictable because so many salespeople do succeed in their own unique way. So I wanted to make sure that I went out and created sort of like a baseline methodology consisting of a buyer journey, a sales process, and a qualifying matrix, and build my training around that. So just really think about, building your sales training from the ground up and invest that time up front. We spend about 30 days up front getting folks, through that methodology and really understanding it. The other big opportunity here is, getting back to how the buyer has so much more control today. it's really critical in training to try to get your salespeople into the mindset of the buyers they're going to call on. Try to help them feel what it's like to be in the day-to-day job of that buyer. It'll help them be more consultative and better partners to that buyer in the end. So as an example here at HubSpot, every single one of our salespeople in the first 30 days of training, they build their own website on the HubSpot software. They create their own blog. They create their own social media following. They do A/B tests on landing pages and forms. They set up a lead nurturing campaign. They segment the leads database and sends out a custom email. They measure the whole thing top to bottom using the HubSpot software. And by the time they get on the phone with their first marketer or business owner or prospect, they can oftentimes school them, to be honest with you, on these concepts of inbound marketing because they didn't just read a book about it, they lived through it. They generated the dozens and dozens of social media followers. They ranked in Google for hundreds of words through this particular process. So think about your value prop, your buyer, and how in training you can go the extra mile to let your salespeople sit in their seat. And the final part is just, as salespeople, we have huge opportunities to tee ourselves up as thought leaders, right? So, I often meet salespeople like, Mark, I cold call 50 hours a month. I'm like, oh, that's great. You got to do it. You got to go and do your demand gen. But here's my challenge to you. Next month and the month after, cold call only 40 hours a month. And with the 10 hours a month that you save, participate online where your buyers are conversing. Find the blogs they read those blogs, comment on those blogs. Find the LinkedIn groups that they participate in, answer their questions. Find the people on Twitter that they respect, follow those same people and retweet their stuff. And in fact, write a guest blog for your own company blog as you being the author. And then ask yourself after those 2 months, were those 10 hours a month better spent cold calling or participating online within the areas where prospects are buying? And almost all the time, the salespeople have a great experience. They're building up their brand, building up their trust with their buyers, probably get a couple leads, customers through that process. And it's something that can build on itself. So just be thoughtful around that as a salesperson and as a sales leader or a marketer. How can you tee up your salespeople to be successful in that arena? Right. All right. So we've done hiring, we've done training. Let's talk about lead demand generation. Right. And so the question I often pose here is like, okay, let's sit back for a second and think about the last 6 months. How many times did you get cold called by a strange telemarketer and you picked up the phone, got into an engaging conversation, and ended up buying the product, right? And then think about this. How many times have you received a spam, unsolicited email from some, B2B salesperson, whoever it might be, and you engage with that email, or maybe there's a piece of direct mail or whatever, you opened it up, and you ended up buying the product, right? Versus how many times in the last 6 months have you had a problem that you started to research online and did a Google search or maybe posed a question in LinkedIn or Twitter, maybe downloaded some white papers around it, maybe read a couple blog articles on it, and that led to a purchase, right? I mean, the answer is very obvious. I mean, everyone understands the digital age we live in today, the content, explosion that's happened, and the empowerment that the internet's really given the buyers today. But what's funny is when I repeat that question to business owners and marketers and salespeople and ask them, how much time and money do you invest in cold calling? How much time and money do you invest in spam email and direct mail or buying lists and nurturing them or whatever, versus how much time do you spend on Google or social or blogs? There's still, despite being so obvious, there's still a pretty big disproportionate difference there. And that's the challenge, I think, to folks is there's a huge opportunity. We call this obviously inbound marketing, to shift more of your time, energy, and money toward that and that kind of investment. Now, most people walk away and say, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And oftentimes I'll have a CEO come up to me after and say, Mark, it was really great. Thank you. I'm going to definitely start blogging once a week from here on out. And I'll say, no, you won't. And they're like, what do you mean? I thought that was the whole point. I mean, I got to start doing like, yeah, but you're CEO of a company. What are you working, 60, 70, 80 hours a week? And now you're going to add another task to that list. It's not going to happen, right? And so that's a big opportunity that folks need to get over their heads. Is their job as an executive is to not take this on themselves or put this on the shoulders of another busy person. It's to build out a content production process within their organization. And no one really realizes that the journalist is really at the cornerstone of this. Not even the journalists themselves realize that they sort of hold the keys to the future of demand generation. I think our second hire on the marketing team here at HubSpot was a journalist for the New York Times. Like, that's the way you've got to think. And the good news here is like the journalism industry is not exactly on fire. I mean, the traditional places where they are employed, whether it be newspaper, magazines, etc., they're struggling. And what that's left is a huge amount of externally gifted, talented writers that are kind of looking for a new way to redefine themselves. So these puzzles will be put together in the next couple of years and be an early thought leader on that. So, go hire a full-time journalist in your area. Go take advantage of the freelance market. I mean, this is an industry that's used to working for, $50, $100, $200 an article, right? Or go to a local university that has an amazing journalism program, find a junior that's super talented and have them come by every Friday. I mean, there's multiple ways to solve this. And once you do, you can now team them up with a thought leadership committee at your company. This person doesn't have to know your industry inside and out, right? That's your job, right? I mean, you can look around your company. You've got 30 people at your company. There's probably 10 of them that are really thoughtful about your space, right? I mean, the whole C-suite probably is. The sales team's talking to customers all the day. They certainly have a lot to say there in terms of how they handle objections and stuff that can be talked about. I mean, if you build a technical product, the product folks and the engineers would be great members of the thought leadership committee. So get like 10 of those people in this thought leadership committee, and once a week, just organize an interview between one of them and the journalist, an hour interview, right? And they do the interview, and they're done for 10 weeks. And that was it from their time. And when an hour's a long time, the journalist can write a 3 to 5 page ebook from that interview. They can write 3 to 4 blog posts. They can create a couple dozen social media messages about quotes and trends and stats that were mentioned in that interview. And those social media messages will be scheduled over the course of the month and go out there, each one being, pointing back to the blog article that's referring to. And at the end of the blog article is a call to action that says, hey, did you like this, this blog on nanotechnology? Well, maybe you'll like the ebook, the 5-page ebook that we wrote on the subject. Click here. And they click through and they find out, great news, the ebook's free. I just need your name, phone number, email address, and company, and it's yours. And that simple process that put a very small burden on the valuable people at your company and yet extracted the brain power from it and put, time and investment on a, more economical journalist, but very important to your business, creates a ton of social media following, a great list of blog subscribers, a really high conversion rate from visitor to qualified lead that you can now feed your sales team with. So think about that transition. I think this is the trend toward inbound marketing is obvious to folks, but they get caught up because they try to put it on themselves, and think about the journalist contribution toward that. All right, and then the other big thing in here is sort of sales and marketing alignment. Big concept today. And this is, okay, walk into any reasonably sized organization, you don't find sales and marketing teams that get along. You don't. I mean, I've talked to hundreds personally that I've worked with. And usually what I find is marketing thinks sales are overpaid, spoiled brats, and sales think the marketers does arts and crafts all day. I mean, that's the reality. And they go back to their respective corners, and the salespeople cold call, and the marketers work on their trade show booth and do their branding. And that's the kiss of death today. With so many buying journeys starting online, that alignment needs to occur. And so what we did was we sat back and defined clearly what a qualified lead was, and we set what we call an SLA, a service level agreement between marketing and sales, and tried to quantify that relationship so we can move away from the world of these leads suck to like a very controlled and pointed model. Now, where we started was we just, we had our funnel down to a science where it's just, okay, I give a mid-market salesperson 100 leads a month, They connect with half, they create 30 opportunities, they do 15 demos, they close 5 customers for $800 MRR each customer, and that's a beautiful funnel. And if I've got 10 mid-market reps that need 100 leads each, bang, I got to give them 1,000 mid-market leads a month. That's my SLA. And that was really great. I mean, that's top 5% from the companies I speak to. Now, there was a hole even in that model, because when we generated a white paper download from a marketing VP, that was obviously a lead that we were going to call. When a marketing VP requested a demo on the website, well, we're going to call that as well. Now, clearly the demo request closed at a much higher rate. It was probably at 3 times. But it was way easier for the marketer, our marketing team, to get a visitor to download a white paper than request a demo. So there was some natural misalignment even in that model. So what we did was we took it to the next level, and we studied a bunch of leads coming through. And let's take this upper right-hand section here, the mid-market persona that we're talking about here. And we saw leads that were white paper downloads. Let's call it the problem education stage. Let's say they closed at 2%, and they bought $200,000 worth of software when they did. Well, 2% times 200,000, that's $4,000 lead value for that type of lead. Solution research stage, the demo request, well, those close at 6%, also pay $200,000 average software. So those leads are worth $12,000, right? So now what I could do is say to marketing, hey, I don't need 1,000 mid-market leads. I need $500,000 of lead value. And whether you get there through whatever the math is here, 100 white paper downloads or 30 ebooks, or 30 demo requests, that's up to you. And literally, like, this is putting marketing on a revenue quota. Right? Sales is no longer the only one on the revenue. Marketing's on a revenue quota. Right? So just some thoughts there to trigger how to standardize this. Now, sales does not get off the hook. Right? So I would often look, okay, I know that as a salesperson, I need to call a lead right away. But if I get voicemail, do I call them this afternoon or tomorrow or next week? Like, should I try them 4 times or 8 times? As a leader, should I give my salespeople 1 lead a month and have them call that lead 1,000 times, or 1,000 leads a month and have them call each lead once? Right? There's a lot of interesting questions. Obviously, neither one of those dimensions is correct, but which one? You can do some editing there. But so obviously, neither one of those situations is correct. But which one of those is actually the best option, right? So did some study in there. There's an example, and so what this shows is a whole bunch of leads are studied. Some of them are only called once. That's what the x-axis is showing. Some of them are called 12 times. So clearly, when you call a lead more often, your likelihood to get them on the phone is higher, but that costs you more in terms of pursuing that lead. So the y-axis is actually showing the profitability of that behavior. So for small business leads, the ideal call pattern was 5. Right? We should call them 5 times. For mid-market, it was 8. So now I could stand up and say, guys, we calculated the ideal behavior to making the most money at the company. And there's applause. And we programmed it into the CRM, so you don't have to think about it. Applause. And every night there's going to be a dashboard that goes out that informs us and you if you're off that behavior, which they also like too if you're a data-driven company, to make sure that they're actually keeping up those leads. So that's really important. Now that I've set this up, every single day I can measure the marketing and sales SLA, right? So I can see how marketing is doing against their quota and their goal, and I can see if sales has any of these leads that are not being followed by the ideal behavior. All right, cool. So final part real quick is holding them accountable to the same sales process. And I believe heavily that the number one role, the number one job of a sales manager is not to maintain the pipeline, not to drive the forecast, not to create fear amongst their sales team. It is to develop their people, to coach them. And I'm going to give you an analogy between golf and sales. I've tried to learn golf for over a decade now, had a bunch of coaches along the way. And one guy was like, okay, Mark, take a swing. And I did. And he said, okay, turn your grip over a little bit, lean back in your stance more, put more weight in your right foot, not your left. Think 1 o'clock, not 2 o'clock in your backswing, and give me more wrist on contact. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Right? I mean, I'm lost, right? Another guy was like, okay, Mark, take a swing. I did. He's like, all right, here, try this grip. All right, take 100 swings with that grip. And 20 minutes later, he's like, how's that feel? I was like, hey, I'm really getting the hang of it. That feels good. He's like, all right, now do this. Lean back in your stance a little bit more. Take another 100 swings. 20 minutes later, he's like, how's that feel? I was like, oh, that feels good too. And so it's really obvious example, but I've seen this happen with pretty much every single manager that I promoted, where they behave more like the first coach. They get a new salesperson, they see the 90 things that are broken with them, and they throw up with them for feedback for like an hour. And you can see the salesperson's head spinning. And the better coaches that mature and really evolve here, they see the 90 things for sure, but they can isolate the one or two that are going to make the biggest difference in their current status. And they really focus on customize a coaching plan to that. And the best ones actually use metrics to do that diagnosis to figure out where someone's broken. I call that metrics-driven sales coaches. So let me show you how that works. So what you have here is a sales team. You've got a funnel happening here where a bunch of leads are worked, are created, a bunch of leads are worked, a bunch of demos are delivered, and a bunch of revenues closed. And each color represents a different salesperson on the floor in that team. So clearly this person in purple, let's pretend we're their manager, and let's pretend it's the end of the month and we're going to prepare for a one-on-one with them. Well, clearly they're generating a ton of leads for themselves, which is great. They're working a ton of leads, second on the team. But they're really bad at getting those to the demo stage, and they're really bad at closing them. And that's reflected in these close rates over here. So I'm going to start as high in the funnel as I see that they break, which is here in like this lead to demo ratio. Now my first question is, okay, I've isolated the issue, but can I isolate even more with the metrics? In this case, I can, right? Because I know that they're working a ton of leads, and I know they're struggling to get into the demo, but what happens in there? Well, is it that they're calling on the leads, but no one's picking up the phone or getting back to them, in which case this number would be low? Or is it that they're getting them on the phone, but they can't move them along in the process, in which case this number would be low? And this is really important to know because my coaching is going to be way different, right? Like if this is a problem up here and they can't get on the phone, I got to look at email cadence, voicemails, etc. If they're getting on the phone, but they they can't move them along the process, I got to listen to some connect calls, see how they're building trust, see how they're adding value early on in the process to get that buyer to want to move forward. So really classic example of metrics-driven sales coaching. Okay. All right, so that was the show. I hope you guys took a lot away from that. If you liked what you heard today, I wrote a best-selling book on Amazon here called The Sales Acceleration Formula. You can check that out. 100% of the proceeds go to this awesome organization called build.org. And what they do is I have a great passion for entrepreneurship, and they bring that passion to high school students in tough neighborhoods. So some of the biggest cities around the country, these kids are coming up through tough neighborhoods and tough families, and what they do is they expose them, they get them basically to start a business, starting in freshman year of high school, straight through senior year. They expose them to a bunch of mentors, they get this business started, they do a whole business plan contest, and I think the graduation rate jumped for folks who go into the program, jumps from like 60% to like 99%. And some enormous percent of those go off into college and finish college because of the program. So check out Build and check out the book if you want to support that. And then finally here at HubSpot, we've actually been moving in the sales software arena pretty quickly here. We launched a CRM a couple months ago, and we have and that CRM is free. So please check that out. And we have a cool product called Sidekick that helps salespeople know when folks open their emails, which is very valuable. We've got about, I think it's over 50,000 companies, I don't remember the exact number, using our sales software. So if you want to check those products out, they are free for you to try. And that is the sales acceleration formula. I appreciate you guys jumping into my session. I'm hopefully you'll have a